brought in some 2.4 billion US dollars in pledges, but that's still less than half of what was expected. The UN had asked for a staggering 6.5 billion this year to help the millions of people affected by the war in Syria. The tragic refugee situation there is the subject of today's Inside Look, and joining me now on the set is William Spindler, spokesperson for the UN High Commissioner for Refugees in Paris. Thank you for coming in to speak to us. 6.5 billion, it's the largest ever funding appeal for a single crisis by the UN. Did officials really think they could raise that much money yesterday?
Well, that's the amount of money that it's needed. The needs are huge. The figures are very high for the needs, but also the needs on the ground are staggering. Last year, we saw the highest number of new refugees since the Rwandan genocide in 1994. And now our organization, the UNHCR, has the responsibility of protecting and taking care of more than 40 million people around the world. Going back to Syria, the situation there is critical, both inside the country and also in the neighboring countries where more than 2.3 million Syrian refugees are hosted at the moment.
Well, let's talk about the situation inside Syria, first of all. Getting the aid to people there in need is truly a struggle. Explain to us why that is.
Well, basically because of the conflict. Security is a huge challenge for us and other organizations who are working on the ground. We have an operation to help people inside Syria, and we try to reach every part of the country, but of course it's not always possible because of the conflict. That's our main challenge, the main problem that we face inside the country. And we estimate that nearly 4.5 million people have been displaced by the conflict inside Syria, and unfortunately not all of them are receiving the aid that they need.
What's being done to help those refugees who are still within the borders of Syria?
Well, people inside Syria find it very difficult to receive the basic help that they need, and but we try to distribute basic aid to them. There are other organizations that provide medical assistance and food. But it's really a big challenge for us to reach everybody inside Syria, and we are not by any means reaching all those who need us.
Tell us about the role of the neighboring countries who've been taking in some of these refugees from Syria.
The role of the neighboring countries is crucial. They are the ones who are taking the majority of the refugees from Syria. And they are countries that have their own problems. They are countries that are facing shortages of water. Children who arrive from Syria need to go to school. Families need shelter. Food is necessary. And many of the Syrians who arrive are looking for work, and they compete with the locals, and therefore salaries tend to go down just at the same time as rent goes up, because some Syrians can afford to rent houses or apartments. So the situation in the neighboring countries is very difficult. These are countries that have been very generous to receive all these refugees so far, but who need help. And this conference was aimed mainly at assisting these countries to continue to be generous and to continue to receive Syrian refugees.
Are you optimistic at all about the Geneva II conference that's coming up? Do you think that some solution will be found there to help these millions of people in such desperate need?
We hope so, because what we do is just to respond to the immediate humanitarian needs of people. But ultimately, the solution has to be political. And we are hopeful that some solution will be found. Just as in other parts of the world, conflicts have come to an end and have allowed people to return to their countries. So we hope that Syrian refugees will be able to return to Syria eventually. But at the moment, the conflict seems to be getting worse, in fact.
What about other nations around the world? Obviously, Syria isn't the only country now in a conflict. Which other countries are suffering the most, and where has the UNHCR been able to help?
Unfortunately, last year we saw a number of new conflicts and that produced new refugees. Most of them were coming from Syria, but also countries like Sudan, like Mali, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Somalia also produced new refugees. These are the hotspots, these are the conflicts that continue to produce refugees. And more recently, we've seen the situation in the Central African Republic as well deteriorating. So those are the countries that continue to challenge us, and we are overstretched. We have never been in a situation where so many conflicts have been going on at the same time. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, some conflicts continue unresolved. And in the past, sometimes the fact that some conflicts came to an end and allowed refugees to return to their countries of origin offset the number of new refugees. This hasn't been the case. There are countries that continue where the conditions are not conducive to large-scale returns, like Afghanistan, like Iraq, like Somalia. So these people people who come from these countries continue to remain as refugees, although there have been some small returns to these countries. No large returns have taken place. So at the moment, our organization has to care for more than 40 million people around the world. Of those 40 million, about 11 million are refugees, and over 20 million are what we call internally displaced persons, people who are within their own country, but who have been displaced by war, conflict, human rights violations, or persecution.
Are the challenges the same for you from an aid standpoint between countries in Africa like Central African Republic or South Sudan and a country like Syria? Is it a similar scenario?
Well, in many cases, security is one of the main problems that we face, because we cannot help people who are suffering if we ourselves become targets or we cannot safely do our work. But in some cases also logistics can be a problem. It might be difficult to reach the places where refugees or internally displaced people are. But I would say that the main problem that we face is the lack of security in many of these situations.
All right. Thank you so much for taking the time to come to speak to us. William Spindler, spokesperson for the UN High Commissioner for Refugees in Paris. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, now it's time to take a look at what's been happening in the world of sport over the past 24 hours. We'll start with a very